They had been told that capture was worse than perishing. Japanese soldiers and nurses who surrendered to American forces in 1945 braced themselves for mistreatment, starvation, and shame. But when the truck stopped and the gates opened, what they saw stunned them. Order, cleanliness, food, the smell of bread, the sound of music, and soldiers who followed rules instead of rage. Everything they had been told about the enemy began to crumble. Stay until the end to see how these prisoners discovered something they never expected. A lesson about strength, mercy, and the humanity of those they once called monsters. When the Second World War ended, millions of soldiers across the globe laid down their arms. Among them were Japanese troops who had fought to the bitter end, many prepared to perish rather than surrender. For years, Japan's military had taught that capture was the ultimate disgrace, worse than joining the afterlife. To be taken prisoner by the Americans, they believed, meant mistreatment, starvation, and humiliation. But what many of those captured soldiers actually encountered was something they never imagined. Instead of cruelty, they found order. Instead of hunger, they found food. Instead of hatred, they found restraint. And for the men and women who lived through it, captivity in American-run camps became a lesson. Not only about defeat, but about humanity. The shock of surrender. By 1945, Japan's empire had collapsed. Cities were in ruins, industry destroyed, and millions faced starvation. When Allied troops advanced through the Pacific, from Saipan to Okinawa, they captured tens of thousands of Japanese soldiers. Among them were medical staff, nurses, and auxiliary workers, women who had served in military hospitals and communication units. They were terrified. From birth, they had been told that the Americans were monsters. Propaganda posters and army lectures described Allied troops as savages who would harm prisoners without mercy. So, when the trucks stopped at their first US camps, many prisoners braced for violence. But what greeted them instead was silence and discipline. American soldiers stood guard, not with rage, but with routine. They handed out blankets, issued identification cards, and directed the captives toward registration tents. No beatings, no shouting, no humiliation. For the prisoners, this calm treatment was almost more shocking than any cruelty could have been. Life inside the camps. American POW camps followed the rules of the Geneva Convention, providing food, shelter, and medical care. Each camp was run like a small town, with kitchens, hospitals, and work areas. Japanese prisoners were given uniforms, bedding, and access to doctors. Many who arrived wounded or ill received care from American medical staff, including nurses who had once treated their enemies on the battlefield. Meals were simple but regular. Bread, rice, vegetables, sometimes meat or fish. To men and women who had survived on starvation rations, even the smallest meal felt enormous. Many remembered the first time they tasted real bread, soft, warm and filling. They could not believe that their captors were feeding them better than their own army had. Cleanliness was another revelation. The camps had showers, soap and laundry routines that the prisoners were required to follow. To the Japanese captives, who had endured months of filth and disease in jungle warfare, this emphasis on hygiene felt both strange and comforting. They quickly learned that order and health were central to the American way of running things. Discipline and fairness. The guards maintained strict discipline. Prisoners who followed the rules were treated fairly and left in peace. Those who caused trouble faced consequences, but always through an official system, not through beatings or revenge. The consistency impressed the prisoners. Many Japanese officers later wrote that they had never seen such predictable justice, where rank or nationality didn't decide punishment, only behavior. To them, it showed the strength of a society built on laws rather than fear. The work programs inside the camps also surprised them. Prisoners were assigned to farms, kitchens, and repair shops. They earned small wages or extra rations for their labor. In time, many began to take pride in the work, repairing tools, cooking, and maintaining gardens that helped feed the camp. Cultural encounters. As months passed, guarded interactions between captors and captives began to soften. Some American soldiers tried to speak simple Japanese. Prisoners learned bits of English. They exchanged small gestures, a cigarette, a newspaper, a photograph. In a few camps, the Americans organized sports, film screenings, and even language classes. Prisoners were astonished to see their captors treat them not as enemies, but as human beings capable of learning and change. Letters written after the war describe how these experiences challenged everything they had been taught about the outside world. The Japanese prisoners had been raised in a culture of hierarchy and obedience. In the camps, they saw a democracy at work, ordinary soldiers commanding respect, not through cruelty, but through professionalism. Reflection. After the war. When the war ended and repatriation began, thousands of Japanese POWs returned home deeply changed. They had seen America not as a land of monsters, but as a land of discipline, abundance, and structure. Many spoke about the food, the order, and the fairness that had defined their captivity. Some even said that their time in the camps had made them rethink what true strength meant. Historians studying these testimonies note that the humane treatment of prisoners became one of the quiet successes of the Allied victory. It contrasted sharply with the conditions Allied soldiers had faced in Japanese camps, where starvation and brutality were common. That difference in behavior became a living lesson, one that shaped Japan's post-war understanding of democracy and human rights. A lesson in humanity. For the Japanese men and women who had grown up believing that the outside world was cruel and chaotic, the experience of order and fairness in American captivity was almost transformative. One former nurse later said that seeing American guards treat even the weakest prisoners with respect had shown her that strength does not need to shout. The camps were not perfect. They were still prisons with strict rules and deep sadness. But compared to the devastation back home, they felt like islands of stability in a broken world. In that sense, some prisoners described them as places of relief, places where, for the first time in years, they could rest, eat, and think. They had entered the war believing that surrender was shame. They left captivity having learned that mercy could be a form of strength. This is a true story, because sometimes the greatest discoveries of war are not made on the battlefield, but in the quiet moments when enemies show each other what humanity really looks like. Do you agree? Let us know in the comments and subscribe for more true World War II stories.